Please help me. They poisoned me." The words barely escaped the well-dressed man's lips as he clutched the edge of the counter, his knuckles turning white against the polished surface. His emerald eyes, clouded with pain, locked onto Hazel's as she balanced plates of pancakes and eggs on her forearm at the 24-hour diner in downtown San Francisco. Hazel Carter froze, the cheap fluorescent lights reflecting off her metal name tag as the stranger's expensive suit and commanding presence suddenly crumpled before her. The late-night crowd of truckers and night shift workers barely glanced up, too engrossed in their meals and coffee to notice the drama unfolding at the counter. The man's breathing became labored, sweat beading across his forehead as he fumbled inside his jacket pocket and withdrew a sleek metal pen. "EpiPen," he wheezed, the object slipping from his trembling fingers and clattering across the linoleum floor, rolling under the counter and out of reach. Rain pounded against the large windows of Rick's diner, creating a rhythmic backdrop to the emergency unfolding before Hazel's eyes. She recognized the symptoms immediately: the rash spreading up his neck, the wheezing breath, the panic in his eyes, remembering how her younger brother looked during his severe allergic reactions. Without hesitation, Hazel dropped her order pad and sprinted toward the kitchen, ignoring her manager's shouts as she grabbed her backpack from beneath the employee coat rack. Her fingers fumbled through the side pocket, where she kept her brother's spare epinephrine injector for emergencies. Racing back to the counter, Hazel knelt beside the man who had now slid to the floor, his breathing becoming more strained with each passing second. "I've got you," she whispered, uncapping the injector and plunging it into his outer thigh through his expensive trousers without a moment's hesitation. The effect was almost immediate, his airways opening as the medicine coursed through his system, his desperate gasps for air becoming more controlled with each breath. His eyes, still wide with fear and confusion, searched Hazel's face as if trying to understand why this stranger in a stained uniform had saved him. Suddenly, the diner's door burst open, and two men in dark suits entered, their eyes scanning the room with predatory precision until they locked onto the man on the floor. Hazel felt the air shift around them, danger radiating from the newcomers as clearly as heat from a furnace. The mysterious man gripped Hazel's wrist with surprising strength, his voice low and urgent against her ear. "They're here to finish the job," he whispered, his breath hot against her skin as he pressed something cold and metallic into her palm, a key with an address engraved on a gold tag. The two men approached swiftly, hands reaching inside their jackets as they weaved through the scattered tables. Without thinking, Hazel helped her mysterious patient to his feet, guiding him through the kitchen's swinging doors, despite the protests of the cook and her bewildered manager. Rain pelted their faces as they emerged into the alley behind the diner, the back exit slamming shut behind them as shouts erupted from inside. The man leaned heavily against Hazel, his expensive cologne mingling with the scent of rain and garbage as they stumbled toward a sleek black car parked haphazardly at the alley's entrance. "I'm Ethan," he managed between labored breaths, fumbling with his car keys before pressing them into her small hands. "Ethan Gray, and I need your help to drive. They'll be looking for me behind the wheel, not some waitress." Hazel hesitated only for a moment, before sliding behind the steering wheel of the most expensive car she had ever touched, her work shoes squeaking against the leather as Ethan collapsed into the passenger seat. Her entire body trembled as she turned the key, the engine purring to life with a sound that screamed wealth and power. As the car pulled away from the curb, Hazel caught sight of the two men bursting through the diner's back door, their faces contorted with rage as they raised their weapons toward the retreating vehicle. "Who are you running from?" she demanded, knuckles white against the steering wheel as she took a sharp turn onto Market Street. Ethan's head rolled against the headrest, his complexion still ashen despite the epinephrine coursing through his system. "The Mendoza family," he replied, his voice strained as his eyes drifted closed momentarily. "I'm the head of the Gray Syndicate, and someone just tried to take me out in the most embarrassing way possible." Hazel's stomach dropped at Ethan's admission, her hands tightening on the wheel as the implications crashed over her like the rain against the windshield. She had just saved, and was now fleeing with, one of San Francisco's notorious Mafia bosses, a man whose name occasionally appeared in hushed whispers, even in her rundown neighborhood. "Take the bridge exit," Ethan instructed, his voice gaining strength as he pulled a sleek phone from his pocket and tapped a message with elegant fingers. "My compound is across the bay, secured and protected from whatever just happened at that diner." The gravity of her situation settled over Hazel like a heavy blanket as she navigated the unfamiliar luxury car through San Francisco's winding streets. Her entire life, nursing school applications, the tiny apartment she shared with her brother, The double shifts she worked to keep them afloat all suddenly seemed very distant. Rain created hypnotic patterns across the windshield as Hazel checked the rearview mirror for the 20th time, her heart hammering against her ribs. No suspicious headlights followed them, but the absence of pursuit did little to calm the storm raging inside her chest. Ethan watched her with calculating eyes, his breathing still slightly labored as the epinephrine wore off. "You knew exactly what to do back there," he observed. Not a question, but a statement laced with suspicion and something else. Curiosity, perhaps, or grudging respect. Hazel kept her eyes firmly on the road, ignoring the way her uniform clung to her skin from the rain and sweat of fear. "My brother has severe allergies," she explained, her voice steadier than she felt. "I've administered his EpiPen more times than I can count." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken questions. As the car climbed the on-ramp to the Bay Bridge, the city lights reflecting off the wet asphalt like stars fallen to earth. In the distance, fog rolled across the water, shrouding the other side in mystery, much like the future that awaited her at the end of this drive. "You could have left me there," Ethan finally said, his voice quiet against the rhythmic thump of windshield wipers. Most people would have called 911 and stepped away, especially after seeing those men enter the diner. Hazel stole a glance at him, noticing how his imposing frame seemed slightly diminished against the leather seat, vulnerability peeking through the cracks in his armor. "I'm studying to be a nurse," she replied simply, as if that explained everything about why she had risked her life for a stranger. The city fell away behind them as they crossed the bridge, replaced by the scattered lights of exclusive neighborhoods nestled in the hills beyond. Ethan directed her through increasingly winding roads, each turn taking them further from the familiar and deeper into a world Hazel had only glimpsed in movies. Massive iron gates appeared suddenly through the fog, opening silently as the car approached without Ethan needing to announce their arrival. Hazel's breath caught in her throat as the extensive grounds came into view, manicured gardens surrounding a mansion that loomed against the night sky like a fortress. Men in dark suits emerged from the shadows as Hazel parked the car, their hands resting suspiciously near their jackets as they approached with wary expressions. Ethan straightened in his seat, the brief moment of vulnerability vanishing as he reassumed the mantle of authority that seemed to fit him like a second skin. "Boss, we've been trying to reach you for hours," said a tall man with a scar running along his jawline, his eyes narrowing as they landed on Hazel's uniform-clad figure. "And who is this?" Ethan stepped from the car with renewed strength, buttoning his suit jacket with practiced ease despite the ordeal he had just survived. "This is the woman who saved my life tonight," he announced, his voice carrying across the circular driveway with undisputed authority. "And she'll be our guest until I determine it's safe for her to return home." The interior of the mansion was even more impressive than its imposing exterior. Marble floors gleaming under crystal chandeliers, priceless artwork adorning walls that had likely witnessed countless secrets. Hazel followed Ethan through the grand foyer, acutely aware of her rain-soaked uniform and sensible shoes against the opulence surrounding her. "Jackson, assemble the lieutenants in the study," Ethan commanded the scarred man, who shadowed their every move, his tone brooking no argument. "And have Miss Peters arrange suitable accommodations and clothing for our guest." A stern-faced woman appeared almost immediately, her silver hair pulled into a tight bun as she assessed Hazel with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "This way, miss," she instructed, her voice clipped but not unkind, as she led Hazel up a sweeping staircase away from Ethan's retreating form. The bedroom Miss Peters showed her to was larger than Hazel's entire apartment, with a canopied bed and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay where fog still clung to the water like ghost ships. The bathroom contained heated floors, a shower with more settings than her car, and a clawfoot tub that could easily fit 3 people. "Mr. Gray insists you remain here tonight for your own safety," Miss Peters explained as she laid out silk pajamas and a robe on the bed. "The men who came looking for him at your workplace now have your face memorized. Returning home would put both you and your family at risk." Hazel sank onto the edge of the impossibly soft mattress, her fingers tracing the fine embroidery of the duvet as the reality of her situation crashed over her like a tidal wave. She had saved a man's life only to find herself trapped in a gilded cage, unable to contact her brother who would surely be worried sick by morning. The hot shower washed away the smell of grease and coffee, but did nothing to clear the fog of confusion and fear clouding Hazel's mind. She changed into the borrowed silk pajamas, the expensive fabric sliding against her skin in a way that made her feel like an imposter in someone else's life. A soft knock at the door startled her from her thoughts, and she opened it to find Ethan standing in the hallway, changed into a fresh suit despite the late hour. "I thought you might be hungry," he said, gesturing to a tray of food held by a uniformed staff member hovering discreetly behind him. The smell of freshly prepared food reminded Hazel that she hadn't eaten since her break 6 hours earlier, her stomach growling traitorously as the tray was set on a small table by the window. Ethan dismissed the staff member with a nod before turning his full attention back to Hazel, his eyes unreadable in the soft lamplight. "I owe you my life," he stated without preamble, maintaining a respectful distance as Hazel cautiously approached the food. "The doctors confirmed it was anaphylaxis, shellfish extract somehow introduced to my bourbon when I wasn't looking." Hazel wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly very aware of her vulnerability in this strange place with this dangerous man. "I did what anyone with medical training would do," she replied, lifting her chin slightly in defiance of the intimidating aura that seemed to radiate from him, despite his words of gratitude. Ethan's lips curved in a half-smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "We both know that's not true," he said softly, moving to the window to look out at the fog-shrouded landscape. "Most people run from danger, not toward it, especially when the danger wears a suit worth more than they make in a month." "Your money doesn't impress me," Hazel replied with more courage than she felt, picking up a strawberry from the tray and biting into it to hide her trembling fingers. "And I need to call my brother. He'll be worried sick when I don't come home tonight." Ethan turned from the window, studying her with renewed interest as if she were a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. "Jackson will arrange a secure call in the morning," he promised, his tone softer than before. "But you need to understand that by helping me, you've placed yourself in the middle of a war that's been brewing for generations." Hazel woke to sunlight streaming through curtains someone had opened, momentarily disoriented by the luxurious surroundings before memories of the previous night came flooding back. A fresh set of clothes lay neatly folded at the foot of the bed, designer jeans and a cashmere sweater that likely cost more than her monthly rent. The enormity of her situation struck her as she dressed, fingers fumbling with unfamiliar luxury fabrics, while her mind raced with worry about her younger brother, Jamie. At 19, she'd been his primary caregiver since their parents' fatal car accident 3 years ago, working double shifts to keep him in his asthma medications and specialized care. Downstairs, she followed the sounds of voices to a sun-drenched kitchen, where Ethan sat at a marble island, surrounded by 3 men in expensive suits reviewing documents that were hastily gathered when she entered. His commanding presence seemed to fill the space, though she noticed he'd forgone a tie, the top buttons of his shirt undone in casual authority. "Ms. Carter," he acknowledged, dismissing his men with a subtle nod before gesturing to the empty stool beside him. "I trust you slept well, despite the circumstances." Hazel remained standing, her borrowed clothes feeling like a costume rather than appropriate attire. "I need to speak with my brother," she stated firmly, surprised by the steadiness in her voice despite standing before one of San Francisco's most dangerous men. "And I need to know when I can go home." Ethan's expression remained impassive as he slid a sleek phone across the counter toward her. "Your brother has been informed that you picked up an extra shift and will be staying with a coworker," he explained, watching her reaction carefully. "Your manager at the diner confirmed this story when your brother called looking for you." A chill ran down Hazel's spine at the revelation of how thoroughly Ethan had inserted himself into her life overnight. "You had no right," she whispered, her fingers curling into fists at her sides as anger temporarily overshadowed fear. "Jamie depends on me. He needs his medication, his routines." Ethan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly as he rose from his seat, his height allowing him to tower over her despite her defiant stance. "Your brother has received a delivery of 6 months' worth of medications, including his asthma inhalers, plus groceries, and a generous gift card," he stated, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Consider it partial payment for saving my life." For a moment, Hazel was stunned into silence, torn between gratitude for Jamie's care and resentment at the high-handed way Ethan had taken control of her life. The generosity toward her brother revealed something unexpected about the Mafia boss, a capacity for thoughtfulness she hadn't anticipated. Why was I brought here instead of being sent home with a thank you and a warning to stay quiet? Hazel finally asked, accepting the coffee Ms. Peters silently placed before her, the warmth of the mug grounding her in the surreal situation. Surely your organization has ways of ensuring silence without kidnapping waitresses. A ghost of a smile touched Ethan's lips as he leaned against the counter, watching her with those penetrating eyes that seemed to see more than she wanted to reveal. The Mendoza family rarely leaves witnesses alive, he said simply, the casual delivery of such a dark statement more chilling than if he'd shouted it. And they saw you help me escape. Hazel's fingers tightened around the coffee mug as the full weight of her predicament settled over her. So I'm trapped here indefinitely while you fight your Mafia war, she concluded, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice as she thought of her carefully planned life now hanging in suspended animation. Ethan's expression softened almost imperceptibly, vulnerability flickering behind his eyes for just a moment before disappearing behind his carefully constructed facade. Not trapped, he corrected gently. Protected, at least until my people eliminate the immediate threat. The kitchen door swung open before Hazel could respond, admitting the scarred man from the previous night, Jackson, whose serious expression immediately put Hazel on edge. "Boss, we've confirmed the leak came from inside," he reported, pointedly ignoring Hazel's presence as he placed a tablet before Ethan. "Someone with intimate knowledge of your schedule and allergies." Ethan's demeanor changed instantly, the brief moment of humanity replaced by cold calculation as he reviewed whatever information the tablet contained. The transformation was fascinating and terrifying to witness, like watching a panther shift from relaxed to predatory in the blink of an eye. "Have the cars ready in 20 minutes, he commanded, his voice low and dangerous as he straightened his cuffs with meticulous precision. "And prepare our guest for travel. She'll be accompanying us to the secondary location until we've identified the traitor." The secondary location turned out to be a modernist glass and concrete structure, perched on a cliff overlooking the Pacific Ocean, accessible only by a winding private road that seemed designed to spot approaching threats. Hazel sat silently in the back of the armored SUV as they passed through 3 separate security checkpoints, each manned by guards with visible weapons and watchful eyes. "This property isn't in any official records," Ethan explained as they pulled into an underground garage, his voice casual as if discussing weekend vacation plans rather than elaborate security measures. "Only 5 people in my organization know of its existence." Hazel followed him into a glass elevator that rose smoothly through the center of the house, providing glimpses of minimalist luxury on each floor, before opening onto a vast, open-plan living space. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered breathtaking ocean views, the distant horizon blurring the boundary between sea and sky. "You'll have freedom to move throughout the house and grounds," Ethan informed her, gesturing to the security panel near the elevator. "But the system will alert my team if you attempt to leave the perimeter." A young woman with a sleek ponytail and intelligent eyes approached, tablet in hand and professional smile firmly in place. "Mr. Gray, the secure line is ready in your office," she announced, her gaze flickering curiously to Hazel before returning to her boss. "And Dr. Mercer has arrived to check your recovery from the anaphylaxis." Ethan nodded his dismissal to the woman before turning back to Hazel, his expression unreadable as always. "Make yourself comfortable," he suggested, though it sounded more like a command. "We may be here for several days while my team investigates the breach." Left alone in the vast space, Hazel wandered to the windows, watching waves crash against the cliffs below as her mind processed the bizarre turn her life had taken. Just 24 hours ago, she'd been serving pancakes and planning her nursing school application. Now she was essentially a prisoner in a Mafia boss's secret fortress. The sound of raised voices drew her attention to a partially open door down the hallway, curiosity overriding caution as she moved closer to listen. Ethan's voice, usually so controlled, had an edge of barely contained fury that sent a chill down her spine. "3 of my men dead in a raid on the mansion, and you're telling me we still don't know who sold me out?" he demanded, followed by the sound of something heavy hitting a wall. The Mendozas knew exactly when to strike. They knew the security rotation, the blind spots in the cameras. A second voice, lower and more measured, responded with careful precision. "The evidence points to someone in your inner circle, sir. Someone who attended the meeting at the restaurant yesterday and knew about your shellfish allergy." Hazel's blood ran cold as she processed this information, suddenly understanding why Ethan had been so insistent on keeping her close. She wasn't just a witness to an assassination attempt. She was potentially the only person he could trust in a sea of traitors. The conversation shifted to logistics, and names Hazel didn't recognize, her attention waning until a familiar name cut through her thoughts like a knife. "The Waitress. Have we verified her story?" asked the second voice, suspicion evident even through the partial barrier of the door. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she waited for Ethan's response, suddenly very aware of her vulnerable position in this dangerous man's world. If he doubted her motives or suspected her involvement, she had no illusions about what might happen to her. "Ms. Carter's background checks out," Ethan replied after a pause that felt like eternity, Her presence at the diner was coincidental. The Mendozas wouldn't use an untrained civilian for a hit, especially not one with a dependent brother and a spotless record. Hazel backed away from the door silently, relief washing over her even as new questions formed in her mind. Ethan had investigated her thoroughly enough to know about Jamie, about her clean record. Had he looked into her parents' accident, her student loans, her nursing school applications? The conversation beyond the door grew more heated, prompting Hazel to retreat further down the hallway until she found herself in what appeared to be a library. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves housed an impressive collection, from leather-bound classics to modern thrillers, creating an unexpected haven of normalcy amidst the chaos. 3 days passed in a strange limbo of luxury and uncertainty, with Hazel given free rein of the property but no information about when she might return to her normal life. She spent most of her time in the library, losing herself in books while trying to ignore the armed men who patrolled the grounds and the tense meetings that frequently pulled Ethan away. On the 4th morning, Hazel woke to find a stack of medical textbooks beside her door, advanced nursing materials she'd been saving to purchase for months. The thoughtful gesture revealed that Ethan had been paying attention to her ambitions, though he never mentioned the books when their paths crossed in the common areas of the house. The dynamic between them had shifted subtly as days passed, his initial suspicion giving way to something more complex. Respect, perhaps, or curiosity about the waitress who had saved his life, and now moved through his world with quiet defiance. Their conversations, though brief, had become less guarded on both sides. Hazel was curled in a window seat in the library, rain pattering against the glass as she highlighted passages in an anatomy textbook, when Ethan appeared in the doorway. Something in his expression, a tightness around his eyes, a certain set to his jaw, immediately put her on alert. "We've identified the traitor," he announced without preamble, moving into the room with the fluid grace of a predator despite his business attire. "My cousin, Paul, someone I've trusted since childhood, someone who stood beside me at my parents' funeral." Hazel closed her book slowly, recognizing the pain beneath his controlled exterior, the betrayal cutting deeper than he would ever admit aloud. "I'm sorry," she offered simply, understanding that platitudes would mean nothing to a man like him. Ethan's laugh was cold and brittle as he ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, momentarily disheveling it in a gesture that seemed startlingly human. He didn't just sell information to the Mendozas, he orchestrated the hit himself, convinced my father's business should have passed to him when my parents died. Rain intensified outside, mirroring the storm Hazel could see brewing behind Ethan's carefully controlled expression. "What will you do now?" she asked cautiously, already knowing the answer but needing to hear him say it, needing to understand exactly what kind of man she'd become entangled with. "What do you think happens to traitors in my world, Hazel?" he replied, using her first name for the first time since they'd met. "Paul signed his death warrant the moment he decided my life was worth less than his ambition." The brutal honesty should have frightened her, yet Hazel found herself nodding slowly, a part of her understanding the harsh justice of his world, even as another part recoiled from it. "And after that?" she pressed, rising from her seat to stand before him, suddenly needing to know what came next in this dangerous game. Ethan studied her face for a long moment, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. "After that, you go home," he said finally, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. "Back to your brother, your diner, your nursing school applications, back to a life untouched by all of this." The prospect of returning to normalcy should have filled Hazel with relief, yet she found herself strangely conflicted as she met his gaze. "Will I ever be untouched by this?" she questioned quietly, gesturing to the luxurious prison that had somehow become familiar. "Once you've seen behind the curtain, can you ever truly forget what's there?" A sad smile curved Ethan's lips as he reached out, his fingers hesitating just shy of touching her cheek before dropping back to his side. "You should try," he advised, all pretense of the ruthless Mafia boss momentarily abandoned. "This world, my world, it consumes everything it touches eventually." The moment was shattered by Jackson's appearance in the doorway, his expression grave as he addressed his boss. "Sir, we've located Paul at the downtown penthouse," he reported, pointedly avoiding looking at Hazel. "The team is in position, awaiting your orders." Ethan's transformation was immediate and chilling, vulnerability vanishing beneath the mantle of power as he straightened his cuffs with practiced precision. "Prepare the car," he commanded, his voice once again cold and controlled. "I want to look him in the eyes when he explains himself." Jackson hesitated, his gaze flickering briefly to Hazel before returning to Ethan. "Sir, intelligence suggests the Mendoza family may be using Paul as bait," he cautioned, his scarred face tightening with concern. It could be a trap designed to draw you out of hiding. If it's a trap, then we'll be prepared, Ethan stated with deadly calm, turning back to Hazel with an intensity that made her breath catch. You're coming with us. I need someone Paul doesn't know. Someone who can get close without raising suspicion. Hazel's heart hammered against her ribs as she processed his words, understanding instantly what he was asking of her. You want me to be your decoy, she said. Not a question, but a realization that should have terrified her more than it did. Instead of denying it, Ethan nodded once, his expression grave as he studied her face for signs of fear. The Mendozas will be watching for my security team, for familiar faces, he explained, his voice matter-of-fact as if discussing business strategy rather than potentially sending her into danger. Why would I agree to this? Hazel questioned, crossing her arms protectively across her chest as she met his gaze with challenging directness. You just told me I could go home after this is over. Why risk my life for your vendetta? Something flickered across Ethan's expression. Respect, perhaps, for her unwillingness to be manipulated. Because Paul's betrayal didn't just target me, he replied softly, pulling his phone from his pocket and showing her a surveillance image that made her blood run cold. The photo showed her brother Jamie, captured on camera as he entered their apartment building, looking vulnerable and unaware of the watching eyes. The timestamp showed it was taken just hours ago, while she had been safely hidden away in Ethan's coastal fortress. The Mendozas have been watching your brother since the night you saved me, Ethan continued, his tone gentler now as he registered the horror on her face. They know about his medical conditions, his schedule. They're waiting to use him as leverage. Hazel's knees weakened as the full implications crashed over her, forcing her to grip the edge of a nearby bookshelf for support. You knew this and didn't tell me, she whispered, anger and fear battling for dominance as she imagined Jamie in danger. I've had a security team watching him around the clock, Ethan assured her, his hand hovering near her elbow, as if unsure whether to offer comfort. But the only way to ensure his safety is to end this now, to eliminate both Paul and the Mendoza threat in one move. The plan was dangerously simple. Hazel would enter the upscale restaurant where Paul was dining, posing as a potential investor interested in the Gray family business. Her ordinary appearance and lack of connection to Ethan's world would allow her to approach without suspicion. She would plant a tracking device on Paul that would allow Ethan's team to follow him to the Mendoza meeting later that night. Once they had the location of both threats, Ethan's men would move in and end the danger permanently. You're asking me to walk into a nest of vipers with nothing but my wits to protect me, Hazel observed as she studied the building blueprints spread across Ethan's desk. What happens if Paul recognizes me from the news coverage of the diner incident? Ethan's mouth tightened into a grim line as he adjusted his cufflinks, a nervous habit she'd begun to recognize during their days together. The media coverage was minimal, and your face wasn't clearly shown in any footage, he assured her, though the tension in his shoulders betrayed his concern. Hours later, Hazel barely recognized herself in the mirror of the downtown hotel room, where they'd established their base of operations. The designer dress hugged curves she usually hid beneath her waitress uniform, while expert makeup and styled hair transformed her completely. Remember, you don't need to engage him in lengthy conversation, Ethan reminded her, his eyes carefully avoiding lingering on the plunging neckline of her dress. A brief introduction, a mention of investment opportunities, and just enough contact to slip this into his pocket. The restaurant exuded old-world luxury, crystal chandeliers casting golden light over white tablecloths and silver place settings, soft classical music providing an elegant backdrop to murmured conversations. Hazel moved through the space with carefully practiced confidence. Paul Gray proved easy to identify, his resemblance to Ethan unmistakable in the dark hair and strong jawline, though his eyes lacked the depth and intelligence that made his cousin so compelling. He sat alone at a corner table, checking his watch nervously. Mr. Gray? Hazel approached with a practiced smile, extending her hand in professional greeting just as they'd rehearsed. Amanda Pierce, West Coast Ventures. I believe my assistant reached out about discussing potential investment opportunities. Paul's eyes widened briefly in confusion, before smoothing into practiced charm, rising to his feet with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Of course, Ms. Pierce, he lied smoothly, gesturing to the empty chair across from him. The conversation flowed with surprising ease as Paul preened under her fabricated interest, his ego clearly enjoying the attention from an attractive woman. As he leaned forward to refill her wine glass, Hazel executed the move they'd practiced, a slight stumble that sent her clutch spilling across the table. How clumsy of me, she apologized, gathering her belongings while deftly slipping the tracking device into the inner pocket of his suit jacket as he helped collect the scattered items. I'm not usually so uncoordinated. 20 minutes of superficial business discussion later, Hazel made her excuses with promises of a formal meeting the following week. Relief washed over her as she exited the restaurant without incident, the waiting car pulling smoothly to the curb as planned. The door opened to reveal not the driver she expected, but Ethan himself, tension evident in every line of his body. "It's done," she confirmed as the car pulled away, adrenaline making her hands shake now that the performance was over. "He's heading toward the Marina District," Ethan observed, studying the tracking data on his tablet, his voice tight with controlled fury. "Straight to the Mendoza compound, just as we predicted." Back at the hotel suite serving as their command center, Hazel watched the organized chaos of Ethan's security team preparing for the night's operation. Men checked weapons while others studied building schematics, the air thick with tension and purpose. "You did well tonight," Ethan acknowledged, appearing at her side with a glass of water and 2 pills that she recognized as mild anxiety medication. "The hard part is over for you. My team handles everything from here." Hazel accepted the water, but declined the pills with a slight shake of her head, unwilling to dull her senses while Jamie's safety hung in the balance. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice steadier than she expected. Before Ethan could respond, Jackson burst through the door, his expression urgent as he approached his boss. "Sir, we've got movement. Paul just entered the Mendoza compound, but there's something else," he reported, extending a tablet displaying security footage. The screen showed Jamie, her brother, being escorted into the same building by 2 men in dark suits. "No," the word escaped her lips in a horrified whisper as she grabbed the tablet, confirming with her own eyes the nightmare unfolding on screen. "Change of plans. This is now a rescue operation," Ethan commanded, checking his own weapon with practiced efficiency, before turning back to Hazel with unexpected gentleness. "I'm going to bring him back to you." "No," Hazel stated firmly, stepping away from his touch with newfound resolve burning through her fear. "He's my brother. I'm coming with you." Ethan's expression darkened, the muscle in his jaw twitching as he struggled between pragmatism and understanding. "It's too dangerous, Hazel," he argued, though something in his eyes suggested he already knew she wouldn't be dissuaded. "Jamie has severe asthma that can be triggered by stress. He knows my voice, trusts me," she countered, gathering her courage as she held his gaze. "If he panics during extraction, I need to be there." The tactical plan shifted rapidly to accommodate her presence. Dark clothing to replace her elegant dress, a bulletproof vest that felt impossibly heavy against her ribs. She would remain in the vehicle until Jamie was located, then assist only in the final extraction. "Your only job is your brother," Ethan reminded her as they approached the compound, his hand briefly covering hers in the darkness of the SUV. "Leave Paul to me." The waiting was excruciating, minutes stretching into eternities as Hazel monitored the team's communications through a small earpiece, heart pounding painfully against the confines of her protective vest. The radio crackled with coded phrases until 3 simple words cut through. "Package located southeast." Jackson appeared at the vehicle window, signaling for her to follow him through the darkness toward a service entrance where 2 of Ethan's men stood guard. The corridors beyond felt surreal, expensive artwork adorning walls that concealed violence and betrayal. "Jamie," Hazel's whispered cry escaped her lips before she could stop it, as she entered the small office where Ethan stood protectively beside her brother, who sat pale and trembling in an ornate chair. The relief in his eyes when he saw her nearly broke her heart. "I'm okay," Jamie assured her, though his wheezing breath betrayed the stress-induced asthma attack building in his lungs. "These men just showed up at the apartment, said you were in trouble and needed my help." Ethan's expression hardened as he pressed Jamie's inhaler into the young man's hand, his eyes never leaving the doorway as his team secured their escape route. "We need to move now," he stated, the command in his voice brooking no argument. The journey back through the corridor seemed infinitely longer with Jamie between them, his breathing still labored despite the medication as they moved as quickly as his condition would allow. Hazel focused entirely on her brother's wheezing, and Ethan's steady presence guiding them. The first gunshot shattered the tense silence, followed by the controlled chaos of Ethan's security team returning fire from positions along their escape route. Ethan immediately pushed both Hazel and Jamie behind a marble pillar, shielding them with his body. "Keep moving toward the exit," he instructed, his voice calm despite the violence erupting around them. "Jackson will get you to the car. I need to finish this with Paul." Fear gripped Hazel's heart as she recognized the dangerous determination in his eyes. the look of a man prepared to sacrifice himself to end the threat permanently. "Ethan, don't!" she pleaded, gripping his arm with desperate fingers. Something softened briefly in Ethan's expression as he looked at her, his free hand coming up to touch her cheek with surprising tenderness. "Get your brother to safety," he insisted gently. "I'll find you when this is over." Hazel's last glimpse of Ethan was of his tall figure disappearing into the smoke-filled corridor, weapon raised as he moved toward danger rather than away from it. The cool night air hit her face as Jackson pushed them through the service entrance toward the waiting SUV. The drive back to Ethan's compound passed in a blur of worry and explanations, Jamie's condition stabilizing as the specialized medical team Ethan had arranged attended to him. Hazel paced the elegant living room like a caged animal, jumping at every sound as hours passed with no word. Dawn was breaking over the bay when Hazel heard the distinctive sound of helicopter blades cutting through the morning air. She rushed to the helipad, heart in her throat as the sleek black aircraft touched down, and the door slid open to reveal Ethan, bloodied but alive. "It's over," Ethan stated simply, as medical staff rushed forward to take care of his injuries, his eyes finding hers across the tarmac with an intensity that made the world around them fade away. Paul and the Mendoza leadership won't threaten anyone again. The following weeks brought transformation neither of them had anticipated. Jamie recovering in the guest wing of Ethan's compound, while his sister negotiated a delicate new reality. Ethan's businesses underwent subtle but significant changes, legitimate enterprises expanding under her quiet influence. "Your nursing school application was accepted," Ethan announced one evening as they sat in his library, the space that had become their sanctuary amid the chaos of their colliding worlds. "Full scholarship, starting next semester. No strings attached." "What happens now?" she asked, the simple query encompassing all the complexity of their unusual relationship. The waitress who had saved a Mafia boss, only to find herself irrevocably changed by his world, their fingers intertwined across the small space between them. "That depends entirely on you," Ethan replied, his thumb tracing gentle patterns against her palm as vulnerability flickered across his usually guarded expression. "I find myself unwilling to return to who I was before a certain waitress saved more than just my life that night. Thank you all for following this story. If you enjoyed it, please write in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video, as your support is important for me to continue creating content here.
Ну, вот такие вот интересные вопросы на самом деле. И, наверное, вот для бедных людей тоже, как бедных, я имею в виду финансово, которые, зависимые финансово сильно. Богатые — это независимые финансово. Да, им пофигу вообще, там, что сколько стоит, не считают ни копейки. И вот бедный человек, что может держать его в морально нормальном состоянии? Это, наверное, возможно, поддержка семьи, поддержка друзей. Ну, как я и говорил, к примеру, как у меня есть сосед, вот у него есть поддержка родителей, да, поддержка друзей. Но он не вылазит из ситуации, в которую залез. И получается, что у нас получается? Что это тоже не важно? Что даже имея поддержку своих родственников, друзей, ты не вылезешь из дизморали, из такого образа жизни? Получается, нет. Так что же тогда? Алло.
Алло, Андрей.
Алло.
Ты еще не заезжал?
Вот я еду, сейчас заеду скоро.
Не едь туда, все, оплата пришла.
Все, хорошо, давай. Вот, как я и говорю, можно... Так что же для человека самое главное получается? Чтобы держаться на плаву. Многих же не останавливают, дети не останавливают, да, которые имеются. Да, любовь к детям тоже их не останавливает. Да, как-то... Поддержка Наверное, вот если так разобраться, наверное, самое внутреннее, наверное, если вот так вот разобраться, прямо углубиться, возможно, поддержка жены, типа, или девушки. Если прям вот глубоко внутрь копнуть, тоже на самом деле не всегда. Но если у тебя есть девушка и жена, ты на ежедневной основе с ней общаешься, с ней видишься. Это единственный человек, по сути, да, который, наверное, важен в твоей жизни, который может дать дельный типа совет. И почему же тогда люди, наверное, расходятся, разъезжаются, перестают быть вместе, раз это так важно? Наверное, из-за того, что вот нету вот этого как раз таки, наверное, какого-то отдельного совета, какой-то внутреннего чувства нужности этому человеку. Да, люди расходятся, потому что ты не получаешь каких-то тех чувств, которых ты нигде не больше не получишь. Не можешь получить. Ни за деньги, ни еще как-либо. И когда у тебя, наверное, нету этого чувства внутреннего, люди, наверное, потом расходятся. И потом люди, многие, наверное, попадают вот в эти депрессии. Помимо финансовых проблем, нереализованности, да, и еще семейные неудачи какие-то добавляются. Наверное, это было всегда у людей. Просто раньше, наверное, этому не придавали такой огласки, возможно. Да и раньше было чуть, наверное, возможно, проще. Я говорю, человеку надо было всего лишь выполнять свои функции какие-то. Да? Как бы человек мог сходить там, отработать, к примеру, на заводе, прийти, и он был спокоен уже. Что все, типа, он сделал все, что от него требуется. В наше же время ты этого не можешь сделать. И получается, помимо того, что вот оно от этого-то и все исходит на самом деле. Семьи от этого-то и рушатся. Да, от того, что когда ты понимаешь о том, что твоя нереализация в жизни, понятно, что это твоя вина, да, какая-то в чем-то, что ты не смог себя найти. И помимо этого, если у тебя еще нет какой-то внутренней поддержки в твоей семье, то как бы это все и приводит к тому, что люди расходятся. И оба, наверное, остаются в какой-то такой дизморали оба, да, в какой-то, наверное, все равно внутренней депрессии. Короче, и как же избежать этого всего, наверное, главный вопрос. Тут, наверное, несколько вариантов. В наше время, наверное, это наверное, не опускать руки никогда, в первую очередь. Если взять со стороны мужчины, да, то в наше время, наверное, главное не то, типа, сколько он зарабатывает, а главное, чтобы, наверное, не опускать руки. Потому что работа примерно плюс-минус вся одинаковая. Плюс-минус везде она одинаково оплачивается. Да, но хотеть и стараться чего-то большего и не опускать руки, наверное, это одно из самых главных вещей. Да, стараться и хотеть чего-то большего. И тут вступает, наверное, вот это вот как раз таки еще и семейная поддержка, да, любовь, нежность, да, какая-то, поддержка словесная. И это, наверное, все сохраняет в тебе мотивацию к стремлению, к жизни, к желанию добиться чего-то большего. Можно не хотеть ничего на самом деле. Да? Устроиться в какую-то организацию, зарабатывать 100 тысяч рублей. Но тебе этих денег явно не будет хватать. И в оконцове ты опять-таки поймаешь, наверное, эту дезмораль. Потому что все оно по кругу крутится. И потом люди на СВО уходят, умирают за 5-7 миллионов рублей. И я не думаю, что это кого-то осчастливит. Ну, во всяком случае, данного человека точно это не осчастливит. Говоря именно о поддержке, что значит поддержка? Как она выглядит, поддержка эта семейная? Наверное, у каждого это, по-разному немного. В любом случае, каждому человеку нужны какие-то разные вещи от другого человека. Да? Всегда же отношения — это взаимный обмен чем-то. Да? И когда люди от друг друга этот взаимный обмен получают, будь то, это могут быть разные вещи.